Hello, this is a continuation of my summary of Alistair Parker's book, The Second World War, this one dealing with the consequences of the defeat of France in 1940. It comes from chapter 2 of Parker's book. This is the final section. So, the defeat of France. For Hitler, the French surrender had two enormous advantages. Firstly, the areas of strategic significance to Germany would come under direct German rule, and the French rump state could be governed indirectly by a subservient French government. And secondly, the French fleet would be prevented from joining Britain's Royal Navy. France was accordingly divided into two main parts. A German zone of occupation in the north and west, including Paris, the northern French industrial zone, the whole of the Atlantic coast, and the main railways to Spain, and then an unoccupied zone in the southeast, a French rump state, effectively governed indirectly by a subservient French government. Interestingly, this is quite similar to the situation imposed upon Czechoslovakia after Germany had taken it over, with those parts that were strategically important directly governed by Germany and controlled by them, and then a separate Slovak puppet state for the rest. This is a map of the demarcation areas of France after June 1940. The main division is between the German-occupied zone in the north and west, which does include some territories directly annexed to Germany and areas under direct military administration, and then in the southeast, a free zone under what came to be known as the Vichy French government, Vichy being the town where they established their headquarters. In the southeast, there's a small area given over to Italian occupation. Opposition to the Vichy government came to be led by Charles de Gaulle, who established himself as the leader of those who called themselves the Free French, and after France had been taken by the Allies, became the chairman of the Provisional French Republican government in 1944, and later, for over a decade, prime minister and then president from 1958 through to 1969. So the Free French. General Charles de Gaulle, a successful commander of a French armoured division and briefly a junior minister in Reynaud's government, escaped to Britain, broadcasting from London on the 18th of June to appeal for continued French resistance. Unlike Pétain, the leader of the Vichy government, de Gaulle believed that a world war was just beginning, that the democracy would win it, and that France should be amongst the victors. Few responded to de Gaulle's appeal. Government officials throughout most of the French Empire thought that the preservation of French unity was more important than defeating Hitler, and so ignored de Gaulle. The empire then included Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, large parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Madagascar, Syria, Lebanon, and Indochina, as well as some islands, all of which initially came under Vichy control. The other important development was Italy's entry into the war. This is Benito Mussolini, the leader of the fascist movement from March 1919 onwards, and Italian Prime Minister from October 1922 until July 43. So Italy joins the war. Italy declared war on the 10th of June 1940, Mussolini wrongly thinking that the war had already been won. Italy came to occupy a small sliver of territory in southeastern France along the Italian border. It's difficult to assign any clear ideas or aspirations to Mussolini beyond his own power and an assertion of national greatness. Dictator of Italy since 1925, Mussolini spoke often, but with what Parker terms a bombastic emptiness and a lack of consistency that weakened the credibility of his words. Coming to power as the spokesman, rather than the leader as such, of the fascists, an association of violent political groups who were engaged in physical and moral intimidation of left-wing organizations and trade unions in both the towns and countryside of northern Italy. He secured the support of old-fashioned liberal, in inverted commas, politicians against the socialists and the Christian progressives, and later he also gained the support of the church, industrialists and businessmen, as well as of peasant proprietors, pleased both by the destruction of agrarian unions and by the high prices for their produce linked to the search for national self-sufficiency. The fascist dictatorship was high-handed, authoritarian, and sometimes violent. It claimed legitimacy in a classless appeal to nationalism and incoherent calls, that's Parker's phrase, to national greatness, compared to the patriotic sentiments aroused in Germany, Britain, and France. Mussolini's actual appeal to the Italians was limited, according to Parker. On average, the Italians were far poorer and less well educated, and the concept of Italian nationhood was comparatively restricted in its appeal. Both fascists and monarchist conservatives approved of national triumphs, as long as they could be secured without excessive sacrifices. For Mussolini, national triumphs were a means of strengthening his personal position and would perhaps help him to attack surviving non-fascist institutions like the monarchy. He became restless with the outbreak of war in 1939. Neutrality was not a suitable posture for a man of virility and violence, such as he presented himself. But Britain and France together dominated the Mediterranean. Hitler's dramatic victory against France in May 1940 precipitated a decision, and on the 26th of May, Mussolini chose war. Subsequently telling Hitler of his decision, he proposed to declare war on the 5th of June, but Hitler persuaded him to postpone his declaration until the 10th. Italy then fought France for 11 days before the armistice was concluded, and was completely unsuccessful. Apart from wanting to join the peace conference, Mussolini himself desired continuing warfare. He looked forward to Italian participation, evidently unaware of the weakness of Italy's armed services. On paper, Italy had an impressive army, navy, and air force, but the reality was much weaker. The army comprised 73 divisions, 53 in Italy itself, 20 in the Empire, but only 19 of these divisions were complete. There were 3 armored divisions, but Italian tanks were either very light or mainly obsolete. Italy had a very large navy, but most of the equipment was defective, as was the training of ships' companies. The 115 submarines were slow, noisy, shallow diving, and of limited endurance. Italy also had a large air force, but only 1/3 of the 3,300 planes were reasonably modern, and almost half were not immediately available for use. There was also a problem with the officer corps. Whilst individual officers were brave, most, according to Parker, were self-centered, self-indulgent, and professionally ignorant. Italy had no traditional military class, apart from which able officers could be drawn. The mass of the soldiery were patient and good-humoured, and like the officers, some were very brave, but in general they lacked the sense of national patriotism which could overcome regional identities, unlike the German army, for example. Metropolitan Italy itself was vulnerable to attack, and would find it difficult to defend its overseas empire, comprising Eritrea, recently conquered Ethiopia, Italian Somaliland, Libya, the Dodecanese Islands, and most recently Albania. Mussolini himself was thinking of a short war of expansion lasting only a few months, not a long war of defense. He wanted to create a satellite state out of part of Yugoslavia, extend Albania at Greece's expense, and in particular drive Britain out of Egypt, and so secure control of the Mediterranean and of a safe route to East Africa via the Suez Canal. These ambitious plans were absurd, requiring that Italy overcome British force. Italian participation threatened Britain's control of the Mediterranean, the defense of Egypt and the Suez Canal, Palestine, and the oil fields in the Gulf. So Britain obviously would resist. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say for the moment. That ends this particular chapter. Many thanks for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without which these videos wouldn't get made. If you want to support my channel, you're very welcome to do so. It really is very helpful. Like the videos if you will, comment on them, share them, subscribe to the videos if you want to be notified of future videos, and I'll give links to Patreon and PayPal below if you want to provide practical support. Next week, Britain alone. Have a good day.